Hello and welcome to part 4 of the OCI session on Identity and Access Management, level 200. My name is KD. I'm a part of the product management team in OCI. In the first 3 parts of this session, we looked at things like instance principles and dynamic groups in IAM. We looked at setting up multi-factor authentication with OCI, advanced policies with where conditions, and we also looked at identity federation with OCI. If you have not seen these sessions, I would recommend that you watch these sessions first. There is also a 100 level IAM session that you should watch for the basic understanding and the core principles of IAM service before you come to the 200 level. I'm going to skip the first few slides that were covered in parts 1, 2, and 3. In this part, we are going to discuss compartments and how do you set up IAM and compartments in an enterprise environment. Okay, here we go. All right, at the very basic level, compartments are a primary building block. They are a logical construct, actually, not physical, but they allow you to organize your OCI resources. You are able to write IAM policies against compartments, as you know, and this allows you to write in a very fine, control in a very fine-grained manner uh, how people or how users are able to access resources in your compartment. So when your tenancy is first provisioned, a root compartment is created for you. And this root compartment contains all the OCI resources, including any other compartments that you create. You can essentially, launch all your OCI resources in your root compartment and give all the users in your tenancy access to everything in the root compartment. But in an enterprise environment, as you know, that's just not a valid option. It makes no sense. So you would actually think about how you want to manage your resources. It would typically depend on how your teams within your company are structured and how their access needs to be controlled or restricted to particular resources, and based on that you would create your compartment hierarchy. We are going to look at an example hierarchy in a little bit, but for right now it's enough to understand that you should think about organizing your compartment and compartment hierarchies. The compartments can be nested up to 6 deep. We'll look at that shortly. I'll show you in console how to do that. But you once you launch a resource, let's say you launch a new instance in OCI, you would need to specify where that which compartment that instance is going to be launched into, and similarly object storage buckets and all of those things. And you can once you actually, before I talk more about compartment, let me just go to the console and show you some of the basic things related to compartments. I've logged into my OCI tenancy, so you can get to compartments under identity. There is compartments, but before we start looking at that, there is another useful tool under governance called Compartment Explorer. You can use Compartment Explorer to see all the resources that you have in different compartments. It is important, or this tool is particularly useful because in an enterprise environment with a lot of resources and potentially a lot of compartments and and their policies. This can get pretty complicated to understand what is where. So the Compartment Explorer would help you understand where the things are. Right. The compartment is a global thing. So in the sense that uh, they are tenancy wide across all the regions. So when you create a compartment, it is available in every region that your tenancy is subscribed to. Not necessarily all OCI regions, but your tenancy gets that's subscribed to particular regions, and then your compartments would be visible everywhere. And in this Compartment Explorer tool, you can, in this case, this is my root compartment. I can filter by resource types, and I see all my instances running in the root compartment. But in this case, it shows everything in the root compartment. I can similarly choose a different compartment and get a view globally. For me, everything is running in US Phoenix region, but if there are other regions, everything would show up here, and I'll be able to filter against them. And let's go back to the compartments console. Here you see I have these 5 compartments. My root compartment has 4 subcompartments, and let's just uh, pick an example. Let's say that you have a company-wide compartment called My Company. In that, you can create multiple compartment. Let's say you have multiple projects. I already have project 1, so I'm going to call it project 2 compartment. I can add tags as well, and I can, as I said, create uh, some child compartments here. Let's say I can create a okay. So I have project 1 has a child compartment called a dev, and I can create another compartment under dev called group 1. Okay, and I can go back to compartments, my company. In project 1, we were creating all these compartments. Now I can create a compartment called test. And so I have a hierarchy now, in which I have a company-wide compartment called My Company. In that, I have 2 project-level compartments. I can create another compartment called DB admins. And let's say another compartment called network admins. I'm creating that because in many enterprises there is a single shared team of network admins that can work across multiple projects. And this is where it comes to thinking about how you want to uh, organize your compartments. This will make it easy for you to launch your resources in specific compartments and write policies against compartments. Uh, and as you saw, that I was able to create multiple hierarchies of compartments as well. Okay, so let's go back to the presentation. We will keep on using this example moving forward, hopefully. Uh, and it's these compartments are also, as I said, useful because when you write a policy rule to grant a group of users access to a resource, you specify the compartment to apply the access rule. So which also means that after creating a compartment, you should write at least one policy for it Otherwise, nobody can access it except for the administrators or users who have permissions set at the tenancy level. Um, and for the nested hierarchical compartments, when creating a compartment inside another compartment, this child compartment inherits the permissions from the compartments higher up in its hierarchy. So this is called policy inheritance, and that also helps you write uh, really fine-grained policies for access control. Uh, and when you write and it's also important to remember that if you choose to distribute your resources across compartments, and the users need access to these different resources, then your IAM policies should provide appropriate permissions for each compartment for all the users that would need access to these resources. So, if all your resources are in one compartment, you just write policy against it, and the users in the group for which the policy is written all get access to it. But if you distribute your resources across compartments, then you have to give appropriate access to these users across these different compartments, uh, which can be very useful. It can get complicated, so be a little bit thoughtful on how you want to distribute, create your compartment hierarchies and distribute your resources, and then write your IAM policies appropriately. Uh, and if you want to delete a compartment, you can do that. But the compartment itself should be empty. It should have no resources in it. All right, and in a the enterprise environments can be very dynamic. So you might need to reorganize your resources in terms of moving them from one compartment to another. They can be Most of the resources can be moved, some can't. But you have to be go resource by resource to see what can be moved. And also some resources have attached resource dependencies. Some are independent, and not all attached dependencies would move with the resource when you move the resource from one compartment to another. We'll look at an example of moving an instance from one compartment to another, but the attached volume will not move. The VNIC would move to the new compartment, but the attached block volume would stay in the previous compartment. Uh, and you'll have to move that independently. And after you move the resource to the new compartment, the policies that govern the IAM policies that you have written for this new compartment, they would apply immediately to this resource that just came in. So the access to this resource might get affected. So you have to be careful of that, and modify policies if required. Uh, and you'll have to actually, let's look at an example to see uh, the moving of resources. Let's see, I am going to go to my compute instances. And in here, another thing to remember or is useful about compartment is that in this OCI console, when you choose a compartment, it sort of acts as a filter to show you only the resources in that particular compartment and nowhere else, right? So I have one instance running here. I don't actually have any instance running in this IT compartment, for example. So it's a good filter. But here is my instance. So if I look at this instance called dev1, I can see that it's running in my root compartment right now. It has one attached volume. That volume is also its volume is called volume1. It's attached. It's also in the root compartment. I have attached VNIC, and it's the primary VNIC, and it is also in the root compartment. Right, obviously the boot volume, we can see that it's actually in the uh, root compartment as well. All right, so let's do something. Uh, let's move this dev1 instance. So you see there is an option called move resource. I'm going to say I want to move this instance to dev1. We saw that there is no other instance sorry, let's say I want to move this dev1 instance into the IT compartment. We saw that there is no instance running in IT compartment. So let's move the resource. Uh, and did I actually? Yes, so it's moving the resource right now, and it is showing that this resource is being moved into the IT compartment, but the attached block volume 1, stays in the root compartment. The attached VNIC, it stays in the root compartment as well, right? So uh, you have to manually move them if you want, but this instance is in the IT department. So if you go back to the if you go back to this main instance page, you see that there is nothing running in the root compartment. And if you go to the IT compartment, you now see that dev1 is in here, while the attached block volume attached to it is still in the root compartment, and then you can move this resource if you want as well. So let's go back to the presentation. That was about moving resources between compartments, but you can actually move a compartment to a different parent compartment as well. Uh, this topic is covered in good detail in the level 100 of the IAM session. So I would encourage you to watch that session for complete information, but let me cover some of the things you should be careful about when you're moving your compartments in this session. On the IAM policy side, uh, to move a compartment, you must belong to a group that has manage all resources level permissions on the lowest shared parent compartment of the current compartment and the destination compartment. So you need to manage all resources, IAM policy. Uh, and in terms of there are some restrictions, and these restrictions in moving compartments are related to the names. So you can't move a compartment to a destination parent compartment with the same name as the compartment you're moving. So let's say that your compartment is called uh, uh, you know uh, A, and then you cannot move this compartment called A to another parent whose name is A, because then there'll be, in that compartment hierarchy, there'll be a conflict in names, and we cannot have two compartments like that, a parent and child both with the same name. So that's a restriction. When you move the to a new parent compartment, the access policies of the new parent take effect, and the policies of the previous parents no longer apply. So as I said, there is policy inheritance. As you move the compartment to a new parent, the policies of the new parent gets inherited, and the old parent policies no longer apply. So that you have to probably redo your policies for the compartment if required based on this move. Uh, and there is something called compartment quotas, which are covered in the ops session. So you can watch that operation sessions for details on compartment quotas. But when you move the compartment to another, the resource quotas in the destination compartment are not verified and are not enforced. So if the moving results in a quota violation in the destination compartment, The move itself is not blocked; it's still going to move. But you would, because there was quota enforced on the parent of uh, the new parent, you would be over quota in the new compartment, and you won't be able to launch any more resources before you remove the previous resources. So please, so we need to be sure to make sure that there are no quota issues, after you move. Um, and the tags are not automatically updated after a compartment move. So if you have implemented a tagging strategy based on compartment, which is a good idea in many cases, you must update the tags on the resources after the move. We are not going to change your tags automatically. Let us put all of this together in an example compartment design for an enterprise customer. Like we were discussing in the example I showed you in the console, I created two projects called Project One, Project Two, and we created network admins, DB admins. There, in this picture, you see that there are different compartments getting created for different projects called Project A, B, and C. In this case, the resources are launched in these particular compartments. The resources include all the OCI instances, blocks, volume, object, storage, buckets, and any databases, etc. And then, in this design, there is a separate compartment called network infra. We were calling it network admins, but network infra is the name of this compartment. And all the network infrastructure, the critical one, is launched in this compartment and is managed by network admins. And then we have separate compartments for dev test work, and production is treated as a separate compartment because it's under change control, and you want to make sure that only very specific groups of users with very specific policies are able to do things here. You can also launch the production resources, your instances and your databases, etc., in the prod network as well. Uh, so with this hierarchy, what you would be able to do is you have users that are part of groups. These users could be users you created in OCI directly, or as we discussed in the previous part of this session, part number 3. These could be federated users. For the purpose of this discussion, I'm using users as authenticated users, whether they are created in OCI directly or they come from an identity provider and federated into OCI, because even with federation, there is a group mapping. So you have users in groups. There are policies written on those groups, and these policies are applicable to specific compartments. So this is going to allow you to write very fine-grained kind of policies to authenticate and authorize your users appropriately. With this example in mind, let's see what happens when there is the compartment called network infra in the previous picture, and a compartment called project A, and there are now policies written such that there is a policy written on a group call, or there are two policies written on a group called network admins. John is a user in the group called network admins. There is another set of policies or a policy document attached to a group called A admins, and there is a user called Tom. So let's look at the policies real quick. There is a policy that allows network admins group to manage the virtual network family in the network infra compartment. So this policy is attached to this particular group on this particular compartment, and then there is the similar policy to manage instance family in the compartment network infra as well. So virtual network as well as instance family, everything can be managed by members of this group, and John is a member of this group. And on the other side, we see two policies as well. On the group called A-admins, Tom is a member of this group. And the compartment, one policy lets this group use the virtual network family in this compartment. So, remember the policies can be assigned to different compartments. So there is a policy that lets users like Tom in A-admins group use virtual network family, not manage but use. And then the second policy allows group A admins to manage all resources in compartment called project A. So everything here, all resources can be managed by A admins, and they can also use the virtual network family, including subnets and VCNs, etc., in this compartment called network infra. So with this setup in place, you can do things like John, who's a member of network admins, can create VCNs and other network elements, including subnets, etc., DRGs, internet gateway, all of those things in this compartment. So now these network resources are in place. But since John does not have access to anything in Project A compartment, John cannot terminate, reboot, launch any instance, or do anything in Project A compartment. Now let's see what Tom can potentially do. So Tom can launch an instance not only in the Project A compartment using, but he can also use the VCN in the network infra compartment. So the instance is such that it is launched in a VCN which belongs to this second compartment, while the instance is in the first compartment called Project A. But Tom can launch this instance, but he cannot launch this instance inside the network admins, network infra compartment, because the policies don't allow Tom to do that. So as you can see, you can in a very fine-grained manner move, have your resources be launched in different compartments, and depending on your IAM policies and group memberships, you can essentially implement the policy of least privileges, right? You want to give people the bare minimum privileges they would need to carry out their day-to-day tasks without giving them anything more in terms of privileges than they need to do their work. And let me wrap this up by giving another example, right? There are tenancy level admins, right? But you can, in this example, the goal is to create a compartment level admin that are able to create policies for the users that want to use resources in their compartment. And these obviously tenancy admins can write such policies, but you want to create a compartment level admins group. So you can do things like you have the users, but you create two groups for users called my compartment admins and my compartment users. So my compartment is actually the compartment for which you're creating the admins in this example. So you create that compartment, and the admins that you want in this example, they belong to the my compartment admins group, and any other users that want to use the compartment called my compartment are made part of the my compartment users group. So we have a compartment, we have two groups, and the admins belong to this admins group, the users belong to this my compartment users group. And then you write this policy document with 3 IAM policies in it. The first one allows these My Compartment admins to use users in tenancy, so they are able to add groups. So this is a required statement. And the second statement is allowing these admins to manage groups in the tenancy, but only for the group called My Compartment users group. So other than that, they are not able to manage the groups, but they need to manage these. And finally, they are able to manage policies, but they are able to manage policies only for their own compartment called My Compartment. Right, so with this in place, and this policy should be attached at the tenancy level. And once in place, they are able to assign the required users to My Compartment users group, and they are able to define IAM policies for their compartment and attach to the My compartment only, in which very specific permissions can be granted to the My Compartment users group. For example, they are able to give all the members of the My Compartments users group uh, the access to manage all resources in My Compartment, but you can write other policies as well. Again, implementing the principle of least privileges and giving everybody just the right amount of authorization to do their work and nothing more. With that, we will wrap up this session. In part 4, we discussed a reference IAM model for enterprise environments. We looked at compartment designs. We looked at moving resources between compartments, creating hierarchies of compartments. We also discussed what you have to consider if you are moving compartments themselves from one parent to another. And finally, we looked at some example compartments and policy designs. Thank you for your time.